From here to the stars. I am your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. Our guest today is Dr. Andrew Higgins. His PhD is in aeronautics and astronautics, and he teaches at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Our guest today is Dr. Andrew Higgins. His PhD is in astronautics and aeronautics. He teaches undergraduate, and graduate level courses at McGill University in Montreal, Canada on gas dynamics, thermodynamics, statistical mechanics, and combustion. His research investigates the dynamics of shock waves in gaseous, heterogeneous, and condensed phase media with applications to aerospace propulsion, hypervelocity launchers, material synthesis, and achieving extreme states of matter. Starting in 2019, he initiated a research group, the McGill Interstellar Flight Experimental Research Group, to consider the engineering problems associated with the most ambitious mission possible, traveling to the nearest stars, which is only one of the reasons he is here speaking with me today. The other reason is that he is the general chair of the upcoming 8th Symposium of the Interstellar Research Group. This symposium will be held on July 10 to 13, 2023 in Montreal. Doctor, I have many questions about your work and ideas on interstellar space exploration, but first I'd like to ask you a few questions about the symposium. First of all, if you would describe the location and the facilities where the symposium will be held.
Okay, so the symposium is going to be here in Montreal. Montreal's a big city, 6th largest city in North America. And we're about a 6-hour drive due north from New York City, just over the border in Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada. Our university, McGill, we're right downtown. You cannot get more downtown than we are, so it's an urban campus. And we'll be hosting the symposium right here on campus, using lecture rooms on the campus for the meeting.
Is there a hotel nearby? I'm sure people won't be staying at McGill.
Right. Yeah, we have a couple of hotels we're going to have special rates with, and for people that are maybe on a budget or students, we're going to open up the student residences, the dormitories in the summer. There's not many students here in the summer, so they have rooms available. So we're going to have inexpensive dormitory rooms available as well, and they're all within a block of the campus, being right downtown. Everything's kind of very, very close together.
Excellent. What will be the format of the symposium? That is, will there be panel discussions, keynote speeches, breakout sessions, working tracks, workshops, roundtable discussions?
Right. So the Interstellar Symposium is somewhat unique compared to academic conferences that I'm used to, is that the makeup of the meeting depends upon what people submit. So we have a call for papers out right now, and we're looking for all of the things you just mentioned. So contributed presentations, panel discussions, working tracks. People can submit posters. We're going to have something called work in progress posters this year. If you're working on an idea and it's not fully baked, you're not ready to go prime time with it, you can still present a poster on what your current work is. So we're asking for people to submit. Ideally, we want abstracts start coming in on January 5th and January 15th, excuse me, and we'll start evaluating and scoring them and accepting presentations then. And we'll keep that open until April, but usually the program fills up, and the program committee sort of defines what the program will look like based on what's submitted. We'll try to keep it a single track. So a lot of big meetings, they become multi-track meetings where you're running from room to room to see different speakers, but the Interstellar Symposium has tried to keep everything in a single room so you don't have to divide your attention between different tracks. So we're going to try to keep that, but if we get a huge number of contributions, we may have to rethink that a little bit. So we'll see in the coming months. It'll get clearer what the exact composition of the meeting will be.
Okay, I've been to many conferences, and you have to sacrifice one thing to go see another. It's very difficult. Yeah. Can you mention some of the speakers and their topics?
Okay, so we have the 3 keynote speakers are lined up. So we're excited. We're going to have Catherine Denning from York University, that's here in Toronto in Canada. She's an anthropologist and archaeologist, and she's going to be talking about thoughts of an anthropologist on interstellar exploration. So I think she's going to be exploring more of the perhaps ethical implications of this. but she's affiliated with the SETI Institute and has been to other interstellar conferences. So she knows our community, and she's going to give us her thoughts on a anthropologist perspective on these things. We have Becky Macaulay Wrench, who's a NASA astrobiologist at NASA headquarters. She's involved with the rovers on Mars, the New Horizons missions, and she's going to be talking about NASA's search for life, so the NASA astrobiology program. And then our third keynote speaker is going to be Professor Stephen Webb from Portsmouth University in the UK, who's written a book. I'm a big fan of Stephen's book. It's called Where is Everybody? And it's an attempt to catalog all the possible solutions to the Fermi paradox. So his first edition of the book had 50 possible solutions to the Fermi paradox. You know, why haven't we heard from aliens yet? And he has a new edition out now. He's gone up to 75 solutions to the Fermi paradox based on feedback he got from a first edition.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's going to give us his, after doing this very thorough, very comprehensive review, I think he's going to give us a keynote talk on what he thinks the solutions are to the Fermi paradox, why we haven't heard from anyone.
Excellent, excellent. I just interviewed him about a month ago.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never met him in person, so I'm really excited to have him host him here in Montreal.
He's a brilliant and charming guy, I'll tell you. Is there an overarching theme to the symposium?
Well, there's a slogan that the organizing committee came up with that really came out of the artwork that we had prepared for the symposium. So we contacted an artist named Alistair Temple. He's based in Sweden. He's originally Scottish, but based in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of beautiful space science fiction themed art. So we commissioned him to prepare some art for the meeting, and it was fun. The organizing committee, most of us are technical science engineering people, and we got together and sort of showed him concepts that people are working on for interstellar flight. And I think that sort of incubated his ideas, and he came up with this, I think, just stunningly beautiful poster. And we went through some iterations back and forth, and he gave us sort of two options for the lighting. So the poster, I won't describe it, you can see it, but he gave us one option where the kind of the ideas were arriving in another solar system. And one option, the star was kind of very bluish and sterile, like a Cirrus or something like that, like an O or a B class star.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gave us another option where the star was a little bit warmer in color, more of an amber color. And we all liked the little bit warmer one. And so the idea was thinking about, after a long interstellar voyage, you're arriving in a new solar system and you're feeling the warmth of a new star, a new sun for the first time. So that's how we came up with this slogan, in the light of other suns.
Mm.
Or maybe it's a Led Zeppelin reference. I don't know. There's a song on physical graffiti called "In the Light." Maybe that was where it came from. But we're leaving it a little open to interpretation right now. But we're hoping as the symposium gets closer, you know, maybe people will think more about what that means. Is what would it feel like to have the warmth of another sun on you as you arrive?
Okay. For those who are unable to attend in person, are there any plans to video capture or perhaps live streaming or even virtual participation?
Right. So all the presentations will be recorded, and those will be available on the IRG, the Interstellar Research Group, the host organization's website after the meeting. But right now, we're hoping to have it the meeting entirely in person. So there's always a little footnote there because the arc of the pandemic, we never know what's going to happen. But the planning is right now to have it entirely in person. So the plan is not to have it live streamed, because if we open up that option, then maybe nobody will come. Maybe everybody decides they're just going to stay home. After the last 2.5 years, I hope people are looking forward to traveling again next summer. So that's currently the thinking. And as our president of the IRG, Doug Loss, likes to say, the most important discussions at the Interstellar Symposium happen at the coffee breaks, outside the restrooms. And it's those informal conversations that happen in the corridor outside that often is where the important work has come. And I think that's been my experience as well. I mean, a lot of my research now has come out of discussions I had at the coffee breaks of previous interstellar symposia. So we want to try to keep that spirit going forward.
Yeah. What is it? Oh man, I just lost the word. I had it a moment ago. Serendipity. Serendipity is a powerful tool, if unpredictable. Yeah. Let's see. How do you envision the symposium contributing to the field of interstellar space exploration?
Well, it takes a village, okay? It takes a research community to really advance a field, and that's been my experience for the last 20 years. I've mostly been working as a mainstream academic researcher, and I can tell you my experience is going to conferences. It's not just a perk of working in research, and it's not just it's not just where you go to report your results. For me, it's really everything. Going to a conference and having other people working in the same field hear about my work, give me feedback, vet my ideas, spark new ideas. That's really everything. And I think research, even if it's the coolest research and it's something you're really excited about, and what could be cooler than working on interstellar flight, still, when you get into it, it's a slog. All research problems, writing codes, doing experiments, developing theory, it can get to be a slog. And in the darkest hours, you wonder, is there anybody that cares about this? It's a niche field right now, and it's easy to wonder, is anybody going to appreciate this work when I finish it? So going to meetings like this and having other people that have worked on similar problems is for me, it's everything. It's where I kind of my validation from. And
Hmm.
it just feels really, really good to struggle with the problem and go and talk about it. And then someone else says, I was struggling with that exact same thing. Here's an approach I'm taking, but that's where the progress comes.
Mm-hmm. How will you and perhaps others measure the success of the symposium?
Well, it's exciting now. We are getting from the last Interstellar Symposium that was held in Tucson, Arizona, in 2021. We're now getting some of the papers that are presented published in a prestigious peer-reviewed astronautics journal called Opta Astronautica. And I think this is what I feel the community needs. We need to get our work registered in the larger astronautics literature, in the exoplanet community literature, astrobiology. We need to start registering in these top tier uh, journals. So I think that's a very tangible thing. You look at the papers that come out of the meeting, and are those papers being read? Are they being cited? So that's a very tangible thing that academics we pay a lot of attention to. And then what I was talking about earlier is there new ideas that come out of the meeting. So there's work I presented at the last IRG in Tucson that came out of discussions I had with people from the meeting before that, which was in Wichita in 2019, and 2017 the meeting was in Huntsville. So discussions we have at one meeting often turn into presentations at the next meeting that turn into publications that come out from the meeting after that.
Okay. And of course, where can everyone go to learn more?
Well, the best thing is go to the Interstellar Research Group website, irg.space, and you can go for a tab there for symposium, and you'll see the 2023 symposium is a link there. And I would encourage everybody to join the IRG mailing list. So once you're on that IRG mailing list, you'll get email updates. And there's also a LinkedIn event page for it. So if you can find Interstellar Research Group on LinkedIn, there's an event there, and you can get the updates via that channel as well.
Excellent. By the way, I've been on the website recently, and I saw that there's a call for papers, which some people may ignore that link, but if you click on it, you get more information about the symposium in addition to the material about call for papers.
Yeah, there's a large PDF document that you have to click on the link to find
Mhm.
that. So I hope
Yeah.
I hope people do click on that. There's quite a bit of details in there about the different options to submit, about
Mhm.
contributed plenary talks, working tracks, these work in progress posters. So lots of different ways people can contribute. Even if people want to contribute artwork, we'll have a venue to present that as well.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Let's move on to the science questions. This is my favorite topic. In the intro, you mentioned that you initiated a research group to consider the engineering problems associated with the most ambitious mission possible, traveling to the nearest stars. If you would, tell us about that research group, how it came into being, how it has developed and grown, and perhaps what it has produced.
I've been interested in interstellar flight really my whole life. So I've listened to a lot of other of your interviews, and it's probably a familiar story. So it starts with watching a lot of Star Trek when I was a child, and then I was about 13 years old when Carl Sagan's Cosmos
Oh yeah.
went into its second run. I was a little young for the first run in 1980, but in 1983 when it went through its second run, I just devoured that. And particularly, there's an episode where Carl Sagan goes into quite detail about different options for interstellar travel, and that just totally electrified my mind. And then a few years later, I started reading the work of Robert L. Forward, who had a huge influence on this field, and later got to meet him at National Space Society conferences. It turned out he was a good friend of my PhD advisor, Abraham Hertzberg, at the University of Washington, Seattle. And I
Wow.
got to meet Robert L. Forward several times. And he was really my role model. I mean, I read Flight of the Dragonfly, and after I was 2 chapters in, I flipped to the back, about the author page, and it said Robert L. Forward is an aerospace engineer. And I said, that's what I want to be. I want to do exactly the kind of things that he was doing, talking about in that book. But I kept it a little bit in the closet for a while. So I thought uh, people just might look at you a little funny if you tell them this is what you want to do for your day job, or are there even day jobs for this? So what I did is I became an aerospace engineer, but I went into propulsion, which is, I think, most people's opinion, propulsion is probably the hardest part of the interstellar flight conundrum, is how to get fast enough to get to the stars. So I went into aerospace propulsion, but I worked in pretty extreme stuff by conventional aerospace standards. I worked in ramjets and scramjets, hypervelocity launchers, hypervelocity impact, for about 20 years, build up my publications and get my citations, and jump through the hoops that I needed to. And then in 2018, I became a full professor. So after being assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, I thought, okay, no more jumping through hoops, and I'm going to work on what I really want to work on, which is interstellar flight. And all of this happened around the same time that the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative was announced, and Philip Lubin published his Roadmap for Interstellar Flight paper. I started going with the fourth Interstellar Symposium. I went to the one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and found the community to be very receptive. Everybody was very warm and supportive of having new people come into the field. So I said, okay, now's the time. So I went on sabbatical. Actually went and spent a year working with Professor Philip Lubin's group in Santa Barbara, which is a nice place to spend your winters, instead of Quebec, I can tell you. And then
Hmm.
when I came back, I started just recruiting students, and it was very, very easy to recruit students to work on this. I had no shortages of students that were lined up, ready to work on this in any way that they could. And so I just sort of thought about what expertise do I have as a mechanical aerospace engineering professor, and what are the problems that need to be solved in interstellar flight? And there's a lot of problems to solve. So you just kind of play the game, what's our strengths, what's our talent stack, and what are the problems that need to be solved? And we just started trying to knock off problems. So we can't solve everything. We're going to need people from material science and artificial intelligence and everything. But there are some problems that I found that were suited to my skill set that we're trying to solve.
Okay. Many years ago, you worked on the original RAM Accelerator Hypervelocity Launcher Facility. For those unfamiliar, describe the facility, the underlying technology involved, and most importantly, the goals you and the team were working toward.
Yeah, so when I was an undergraduate, again, I was obsessed with interstellar flight. I also thought the space elevator was a pretty interesting idea. And then there was a third idea I thought would be interesting to work on, and that is the gun launch to space, the Jules Verne de la Terre à la Lune idea, is just build a giant space cannon and try to shoot payloads into space. And right when I was finishing my undergraduate, a new concept came out for a kind of hypervelocity launcher called RAM Accelerator. So it's a bit like taking a ramjet and flying it through its own fuel tank. So you take a long tube, fill it up with a combustible mixture, maybe methane and oxygen or hydrogen and oxygen, and then fly a little ramjet. Actually, I have the one right here on my. Oh, I'm not supposed to show you things, but I can't resist to show this
It's fine.
uh, uh, souvenir from my years as a graduate student. And so we'd
Mhm.
fly these little ramjets down a long tube with very high pressure, explosive detonable gas inside, and try to ride on or surf on the combustion wave and accelerate from Mach 3 to Mach 5 to Mach 8 to Mach 12,
Mm.
and eventually get up to speeds that where you could shoot payloads directly into space. And so this was a fantastic project. I learned a lot of gas dynamics and combustion and material science working on this. This was the brainchild I mentioned earlier, Abe Hertzberg, who was a very innovative guy, invented uh, shock tubes and hypersonic shock tunnels, invented an early version of the gas dynamic laser. This was one of his final great ideas, was this project. And through this, I got to know Robert L. Forward and a lot of other people in the advanced propulsion community. And I'm still involved. We're still working on that technology. There's still some interesting applications of it, but it's not going to get us fast enough to go to the stars. So I thought it was sort of a good training ground to learn how to do advanced propulsion. But that particular technology might get us to orbit someday, but it's not going to get us to the stars.
Your staff page on the McGill University website lists your primary research interests, which include aerodynamics and fluid mechanics, combustion and energy systems, as well as a few secondary interests that I'll ask about in a moment. I realize that space exploration is just one of your interests, not your only interest. But if you would describe how these areas of engineering might be applied to benefit space exploration.
When you work in the field of aerospace propulsion, I worked in chemical propulsion. So that's in the general area of fluid dynamics, thermodynamics. So that's the courses I teach at the university are on those topics. There's some relevance, but for the most part, most of my PhD in aerospace engineering is really useless for the interstellar flight problem. So to get to the speeds we need to get to do interstellar flight, chemical propulsion is not going to cut it. Propulsion, ion propulsion is not fast enough. Even fission and fusion rockets it's a stretch to see if we can get those to the speeds we need to do an interstellar mission compatible with human lifetime. If you're patient and you want to take hundreds of years to get to the stars, fission rockets would be viable. But if you want to get there within a human lifetime, so you can get data back if it's a robotic mission, they're not quite fast enough. So a lot of that turns out to be not that useful. But probably the one thing that is relevant is I worked for many years in the field of shock waves in gases and then shock waves in condensed matter, so solids and liquids. And one of the big concerns we have about interstellar flight is the dust grain impact problem. So that is a serious concern. That may be one of the showstoppers with certain approaches to interstellar flight. And that, I think, is probably where some of the work I did previously has the greatest relevance. So one of the things I did was at McGill University here was I developed an even faster kind of hypervelocity launcher, not the RAM accelerator I mentioned earlier, but one that used not explosive gases, but used high explosives to implode or basically squeeze like a tube of toothpaste gas to very high pressures. And we were able to launch little pellets up to 10 or 12 kilometers a second to look at, for example, orbital debris and micrometeorite impacts. So that's actually the fastest launcher in the world presently for macroscopic objects. Now, it's not as fast as those interstellar dust grains, which we're going to be hitting at maybe 30,000 kilometers a second if we get to 10% the speed of light. But it's as relevant as anybody else's experience. So I think that was probably something helpful that let us start to look at this dust grain impact problem.
Okay. Some of my questions may have a little bit of overlap in their answers, but I'm gonna power through them anyway.
Sure, yeah.
Your staff page on McGill University also lists your current research projects. One of which is combustion of bulk metals in supersonic flow, which sounds fascinating. If you would describe the process and situations which it might prove useful either in space or on Earth.
That goes back to my work on this RAM Accelerator project. So when we were firing these projectiles at Mach 8 or Mach 10 or Mach 12 into high pressure oxidizers that had fuel and oxidizer premixed in them, sometimes these projectiles themselves would start to ignite and burn. So aluminum, magnesium, titanium, which are materials aerospace engineers are fond of because they have a very high strength to weight ratio, also are all combustible. So the solid rocket boosters of the space shuttle, for example, most of the fuel, the energetic content of that derived from aluminum powder that was in the solid rocket boosters. So for us, this was an undesired effect. We really didn't want to have our RAM accelerator projectile acting a bit like a hybrid rocket where it itself was burning. But there's other interesting places where that came up. And what really motivated me, I had a student do a nice master's thesis on this, was the Columbia disaster in 2003. So when the leading edge of the shuttle tiles were damaged, they believed some of the aluminum substructure might have been exposed to hypersonic flow, and the aluminum might not have just melted, which compromised Columbia's structural integrity, might have actually chemically reacted and started to burn. So I had a master's student do a project on this where we used a little gas gun in the lab to launch little pellets of aluminum, titanium, magnesium, these kind of aerospace materials, into oxidizing environments at hypersonic speed and watch them burn. So usually people know that to get something to burn, you have to have it in powder form. So, why is it the space shuttle burns aluminum, but is also made out of aluminum? So the aluminum in the solid rocket boosters was in a pulverized powder form. So it had a lot of surface area, so it was very reactive, whereas the structure of the space shuttle is aluminum struts and beams and so on. And when it's in bulk form like that, usually it can't burn. But if you put it in a hypersonic flow of an oxidizing environment, it can then burn. So that's what that work was about. So had a very nice master's thesis around that. We haven't published the final journal paper on that yet. There's a few more data points we wanted to get, but there's some nice conference papers that we wrote around that experiment.
Okay. Another of your current research projects concerns the existence and stability of oblique detonations. First of all, how do these detonations differ from others, and what might be useful in harnessing them?
Yeah, so again, this goes back to the work on ram accelerator, which is really like a ramjet or a scramjet flying through a fuel tank with its own fuel and oxidizer already mixed in front of it. So the vehicle doesn't have to carry any fuel or oxygen on board. And the challenge of supersonic combustion is you have to burn things quickly. The fuel and oxidizer are going to pass through your engine in milliseconds, or in the case of ram accelerator, because it's smaller, maybe microseconds. So you have to burn things very quickly. And that leads you to look at, well, what's the fastest way you can burn things? And the fastest form of combustion is detonation. So there's a lot of interest now in looking at different applications of detonation to propulsion. It's kind of the last untamed beast that's out there in the combustion landscape. So most rocket engines, jet engines, ramjet engines use flames. They use turbulent flames to burn the mixture. But there's always been interest if you could use detonation waves. So there's different ways to do that. One way is to maybe have a wedge and try to stabilize a detonation wave kind of hanging off the wedge. That's the oblique detonation wave. And there's another concept we're working on now. A lot of people are working on this, called rotating detonation engines. So feed your fuel and oxidizer into an annular combustor and have a detonation running around like in a racetrack, detonating the fuel and oxidizer as you feed it in. And there's some arguments that you might be able to get a little higher thermodynamic efficiency using that kind of combustion, 4 or 5% maybe. But in aerospace, people will pay a lot for an extra 4 or 5% of specific impulse. So it's work I'm doing at McGill in collaboration with colleagues of mine at Concordia University, another university here in Montreal. But again, it's not something that's going to get us to the stars. So I'm trying to keep up a little bit of effort on this, but most of my attention now is looking at kinds of propulsion that would be able to enable interstellar flight. So a lot of those things you see on my webpage are a little bit of legacy from work I've done over the last 20 years.
That was Dr. Andrew Higgins. This has been From Here to the Stars, a video series produced by the Interstellar Research Group. The IRG is a non-profit organization dedicated to thoroughly exploring the science and engineering that can eventually open up the reality of interstellar travel. Find out more about our next symposium at irg.space. I have been your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to our channel for other such videos. On behalf of all of us here at the Interstellar Research Group, I thank you.